On. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of VAC Roundtable. This one's number 88, and this one's special to me as an old school, hempy. This one, I've got to kind of watch happen along the way, and this man has been an absolute stellar pioneer, basically changing the whole landscape regarding hemp foods, and just somebody who I have absolutely held in honor and great respect, Mr. Richard Rose. Um, He's coming to us tonight from Colorado, so thank you for joining us. And we will just basically get right into things right out of the gate. And first of all, thank you, Richard, for joining us tonight. And what led you to
For having me.
cannabis? And how did your journey shape your role in the hemp industry?
Hey, Eddie and guys, nice to see y'all again. Yeah, I met you. I was thinking about it earlier, about 30 years ago,
Yeah.
in maybe at one of the cups, actually.
Yep, in 95. Yeah, it would have been 30 years ago at the Cannabis Cup because I got married to my previous wife on stage at the
Right.
at the milk bag.
Right. Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, it's been a while. So the way I got into hemp is different than most. I got to it from soybeans. Since 1980, I've been making foods commercially with soybeans and distributing them around the world, industrial ingredients and consumer foods. The cheese of which Tofarella got the company on the Inc. 500 in 1993, number 281 on the Inc. 500. Fast growth. With America's most hated food during the Reagan 80s. So that was tofu. So um, I've been making tofu and then all these foods from it, over 100 of them since 1980. But in 93, I realized that hemp seed had almost as much protein as soybean. And it also had omega-3, which soy didn't have much of. And besides, it was fun as hell. A lot more fun than soybean and tofu and the like. So, we already had tofu-rella, the cheese, and 5 different flavors and slices and the shreds and the like. And then we had rice-rella, almond-rella, zero-fat-rella, and vegan-rella, and maybe one other. So for us to have hemprella as a new flavor was not unusual and not weird. It was just an evolution of the product for our company. Therefore, the wholesale buyers didn't freak out when they saw the leaf or the word hemp on the label, and were pretty amused by it, and so they picked it up. And that's how I made the pivot from soya to hemp. Hemprella in 1994, along with the Hempe burger, and then developed the shelled hemp seed hemp nut in a couple of years later.
And yeah, for everybody, it was really in, as it was called then, the hemp industry. This was the hemp that most we were all only dealing with, which was the clothing. You were the one that was pushing the foods, which we knew through, we're all kind of disciples of Jack Herrera, who of course was a big promoter of hemp and hemp seed. And you were, of course, one of the early adopters of cannabis foods that was openly available. I could get at my Whole Foods in Berkeley, so that was groundbreaking for us. And of course, when we financially supported it because we saw it, which of course was key to a lot of us. Michael Krawitz has a follow-up.
Yeah, pardon my ignorance, but is there any corollary to the whole hemp seed product in a soybean product?
Yeah, huge corollary. I mean, they're kind of cousins in a way nutritionally. They both are around 32% protein, They both have some omegas in it. Soy has a lot of six, a lot more six than three. They can both be used to make tofu. They can both be used to make milk, plant-based milk, tempeh. Pretty much anywhere you would use soybean, you could use hemp seed, hemp grain, including fodder for animals. So we can turn abundance into scarcity by feeding them 16 times more protein than they produce. That's what they're looking at. FDA, AFCO, AAFCO needs to approve it, but once they do, farmers will be able to dump substandard seed into that market soon.
Well, fortuitously, with our next question is actually Michael Crowitz. So, Councilmember Crowitz.
Thanks, Etienne. So, you were instrumental in introducing the hemp-based foods. What were your biggest challenges in getting this out to consumers, regulatory acceptance, and how has that sort of perception of the market changed over time?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. So the biggest was accept getting the wholesale buyers to understand that we were not, even though I had long hair and dressed funny, we weren't a bunch of hippies making foods in the kitchen or in our garage. They knew us. They did five-figure business with us for years. They knew our reputation of being innovative and having new stuff. So when we presented along with our professional brokers who made the headquarter calls, who they saw every month anyway, a hemp product, they raised an eyebrow, but were willing to take a try at it simply because they knew that who we were an ongoing customer, and they were willing to try weird new foods. I mean, tofu cheese is pretty weird on its own. So the stretch from a tofu cheese to a hemp cheese was not that far. The beauty of hemp grain over soya, though, is ultimately is you can eat the hemp grain raw. You cannot eat soya raw, and that alone makes it so much easier because then we could just shell it and it could be eaten raw, the hemp grain. Whereas the soybean has all kinds of anti-nutritional factors that have to be processed out, mostly with heat.
And that's done industrially or chemically at the.
Yeah, it's done. So with soy milk, for instance, or to make tofu, they grind the beans, the soybeans with water, and then they heat it all, and that's where they inactivate the trypsin inhibitors and oligosaccharides that cause gas.
So the heat is what's needed and
Right.
to,
And
to make that shift. All right.
common sense.
All right. Next up will be Council Member Mary Lynn Mathery. Council Member Mary Lynn.
Yes, she forgot to unmute herself.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Welcome, Richard. We're glad to have you. So my question here is, navigating regulations has been a key part of your work. What policy changes do you believe are necessary for the hemp and cannabis industries to thrive domestically and internationally?
The worst thing that happened to hemp in America was legalization
Yeah.
in 2018. Until then, it was a cooperative industry. We helped each other. And after 2018, it became, a much more dog eat dog, and a lot more grifters came in, and it changed a lot. And it was easier back then because it was new and we were professional. And so the FDA came and took our labels and some samples one time. And the state FDA did it also in California, but we took them by surprise. They were not ready for commercial food from marijuana's cousin, as it was called at the time. So we had a much easier time because we were not a startup. We were pivoting, and compared to today, I think it's a lot harder. And if you look at acres are down 95% in 5 years in America. The new American hemp industry is THC contaminated, THC from the process made from foreign CBD, so American farmers don't benefit. The whole point of doing all this was for American farmers to be growing this, not Chinese or Canadian or European. It was for American farmers, not just to make THC from CBD from China. So things have gotten so screwed up today that I don't know. We were growing more hemp in just Colorado in 2015 and 14 than we are today nationally. And for what needs to change is really just turning it into an ag crop, an industrial crop. All this hemp THC business doesn't help that, but once we can get past that, probably in the next farm bill, treating the farmers of hemp like any other farmer is a good first step. Right now, they got to be fingerprinted. They need a background check. They have a drug felony in the last 10 years. They can't grow hemp in America. They do the same in Canada, and we argue over hundreds of a percent THC in the hemp, while simultaneously there's massive THC fraud in the regulated marijuana side. So it's just a topsy-turvy industry right now that is on the ropes, and even Canada's acres are down, and in Europe. So it it's really quite the first thing is to treat it like an ag crop, but then we need the disassociation from the type 1 side, from the THC side with hemp, because the question is always going to be, will this get me high? The first question out of a consumer's mouth will always be, will this get me high? And we got to put that to bed decisively and finally, or it'll just never take off. Currently, military and law enforcement officers in America are prohibited from eating hemp foods. And it's been that way since 1999. Things like that, little cultural shifts, and the federal government buying hemp grain to make foods, for institutional feeding, like prisons or military or schools, things like that. It needs to be more incorporated into the agriculture production economy, not unlike soy and corn is today.
Thank you for that, Richard. Next up will be Council Member Michael Davis.
Yeah, hey Richard, thanks
Hey.
for being here, man. That's some really good information you were just talking about. Kind of a follow-up real quick. What were you I'm not sure if you were speaking national policy stuff, or maybe Colorado or whatnot. I'll ask my question and then maybe you can do the follow-up and then the question kind of like afterwards.
Mhm.
My question is, you've been pretty vocal about CBD not being a novel food in the EU. Could you elaborate on your stance and its implications for the industry? Yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in the EU, they have this novel food rule, and it's kind of like grass is in America, generally recognized as safe, that the FDA has, and that is after a cutoff, which in grass is October of '94, and in the EU was, I can't remember now. And if you introduce a food into commerce after that cutoff date, you have to subject it to all kinds of testing and report and prove that it's safe to be in as a food as a new food, or as they call it, novel food. Now, years ago, hemp seed and hemp seed oil was ruled not exempt from it because it had been eaten for really millennia in Europe, but long before member states were member states, and especially in Eastern Europe. And and then in 98 or so they said hemp flowers are legal in beer, but they never ruled on cannabinoids at all. And so that means cannabinoids, if they're in a food, they have to go through this process, regulatory process. It's quite involved and it takes years and is quite expensive. However, they approved hemp seed oil. They exempted it, and hemp seed oil has on it, on the outside of the seed coat, resin, and in that resin are cannabinoids. So when they approved hemp seed oil, they approved the adherent cannabinoids that are in that. And that's my position, is that they knew there were cannabinoids in there, trace amounts, but still they knew it was in there and they approved it. And we should rely on that today. Um, uh, Now, there's money to be made by the associations not taking that view and pursuing CBD novel food certification. So that's why that's happening today.
Right on. Thank you very much, Richard. Um, Next question will be from me, and it is specifically as someone who pioneered hemp-based innovations. What is the next major breakthrough in hemp products or applications that you see?
Uh, you have to separate that into fiber and grain. We've seen a lot of development on the fiber side with biocomposites and novel retting techniques and then also use of the hemp fiber production for bioremediation of soil. Now, on the grain side, we've seen an enormous amount of new development and research, both medical as well as nutritional, with in the grain with bioactives, peptides, hydrolysates, technical use in baking, emulsions, suspensions, novel extraction techniques, fermentation, umami products, probiotics, things like that. My mind is blown by how much progress we've made in the hemp grain side just in the last year or two. On the Hemp Food Association website, there's a page, breaking news, and it has all these studies, dozens over the last year, all just about grain and discoveries and patents and developments like that.
So, I mean, since you're a hemp foods guy, I mean, what hemp foods do you see, penetrating the market again? I mean, yours was very successful at doing so. Of course, hemp seed oil, I still get Manitoba hemp seed oil myself. So I mean, that's still available and on the market. I can get that through Amazon even. So what food stuff do you see, you know, on the horizon, if any?
Yeah, so the way to make it be successful in hemp is not to start a hemp business, but is to pivot your existing business slightly to hemp. So if you're a contractor, build with hemp, don't start a contracting business to do hemp. And that's how I did it. Is I pivoted slightly from soy to grain. What we had on the shelf back then: chocolate chip cookies, an energy bar, oil, the the burger, the cheese. We had about a dozen products. Today, you can buy shelled hemp seed in Walmart. You can buy it in Costco. You can buy it if you're in Australian Woolworths. It's sold in thousands of retailers. It has millions of consumers today. It's the best hemp product to get into if you want to do that, because everybody eats. Not everybody needs a wall or buys jeans every day, but people tend to eat every day. And once they do, they're going to want more seed. And it's a renewable resource that we can keep feeding people. So the products that will work in the future, I mean, Nature's Path still has a cereal, and there's still about 180 or 200 companies selling products globally with foods with hemp seed in it. People want convenience foods. So bars are always great. Even something like a salad dressing. There's pasta. There's very few recipes that you can't incorporate hemp grain into. And the beauty of it that I found is that it actually adds a savory note to it, that makes every food it's in a little bit better flavor.
Yeah, there's a savory umami-ness that comes forward that is hard to describe until you've had it, especially like just the hemp hearts versus the hull, the shell, which I've had, different foods with. All right. Next up will be Councilmember Wade Laughter. Councilmember.
Had to find the unmute button. Wanted to thank you, Richard, for joining us, and pardon me for being tardy coming in. I'm as a way of introducing myself to you, I'm a devotee of the other end of the supply chain, if you will. Hemp is often touted as a sustainable crop. And I would ask, what steps must be taken to realize the first full potential in sustainable agriculture and industry? Because yes, we have to get the consumer interested because they're the ones who are going to buy the products. And that's a whole education thing. But I'm really fascinated at the potential, again, for hemp to heal some of the damage done by large scale commercial agriculture. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. The fiber, the thing about like hempcrete is it doesn't even, it's so amazing, it doesn't even need hemp. You could be making hemp, you can be making lime building with canaf or ag wastes. They've been doing lime building for over 1,000 years. So if if one way to approach something like that is to start with, say, canaf, and then pivot to hemp down the road once you've worked out the business model, instead of starting with the most regulated, expensive fiber available. The thing is to cart and horse deal, which is going to go first. And the reason acres are down 95% in 5 years is we put the cart before the horse. Excuse me. So we needed to work first on building consumer demand, not which variety is best in Michigan for herd. That's way down the road. We need to build demand, create demand, and the easiest low-hanging fruit, literally, is hemp seed as food, and that could be in literally thousands of products, and on the shelf. And once you've created demand, you work back and you figure out what's the best variety in Michigan for herd or whatever that your buyer specifies, and you work back the technical requirements for that, and then you've done your field trials to figure out what's the best variety in that area to grow for that, and all that. But in the meantime, you don't have to wait all those years to be making money on hemp. You could buy shelled hemp seed today, hemp hearts as it's called, hemp nut as I called it, say from Manitoba Harvest or whomever, and get a local chocolate maker to make you a chocolate bar with 10% hemp seed in it, and get somebody to design a label and put that on there, and bring it to your uncle who has a convenience store distribution route, and ask him to put it into his product mix and distribute it. It's that kind of way you can get into the hemp food business and start making money on hemp even before you've planted one seed. You can start a consumer brand, and you don't have to wait until you even have a factory to do that. You can have it co-packed for you, white labeled as it's also called, by like that chocolate company, or go to a pasta company and ask them to make a pasta under your label, something like that. But we can get started on creating demand today. We don't have to wait for the big associations or the big companies. Entrepreneurs can just sort of look around and see how they can make a food and get it into distribution in locally.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. Just this week, Cornell did a webinar on the molecular bleeding of new seed oil varieties for industrial hemp, amongst other things. I actually got to visit in September of last year the USDA's Germplasm Institute up in Geneva, New York, and they're growing hemp at 6 different facilities around the U.S. to try to figure out which varieties are growing where. So that's realistically happening right now, and I actually got to see it firsthand. So it's pretty exciting and frightening all at the same time.
We did that with Rob in us in Tasmania
Yeah.
about what 2018, and we did 19 varieties on 70 hectares for grain. We're doing field trials for grain, for shelling and making foods down there.
Yeah, it's a big market, and it's only going to grow now once they start to have acclimated genetics. It's going to be very helpful to the American farmer to produce those products, but we still need the infrastructure, right? That's the big
Yeah.
thing that is hugely missing. Am I correct?
That is correct. And that's where USDA needs to step up and quit dawdling. They've put out at least 35, maybe $55 million in grants, mostly for seed development, like you just mentioned at Cornell, and for fiber, but nothing for grain, nothing for food. NIFA is part of USDA, and they National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and they also let grants, but none have done so. The only way there's a hemp industry in Canada was 25 years ago. The provincial governments funded the R&D for the grain for Manitoba Harvest and others. And without the government, the provincial government stepping up and doing that, I don't think there's a hemp industry in Canada. USDA and NIFA need to do the same here, and we need a centrally located shelling plant and oil pressing plant within an hour of thousands of acres somewhere in the Midwest, northern Midwest, to really be able to show that the industrial hemp can be successful in America. The beauty of that is you got fiber, you got stalks coming out your ears. You get at least 4 times more stock than you get seed. So the more we grow for grain, the more stock you're going to have cheaper.
Yeah, but these mills that they're making here are the cottonized, right? So they're cottonizing the hemp as well for those few distributors that it is. But then there's also the fact that a lot of shipping companies won't move hemp,
Hmm.
or without an exorbitant cost unless you know the right treaty codes to show them. I've known people just get outright blackballed from even moving their hemp. So there's a lot of infrastructure issues as well as I grew up in sugarcane country in southern Louisiana, and the mills are central to the farms, to the hectares and of sugarcane that grow there, which is an infrastructure that takes a decade worth of building, which is really going to take in those areas that decide to grow hemp, then that industrial infrastructure needs to come, as you said, from the government and support and grants to really help make that a reality. Otherwise, we're going to fall flat on our faces again.
And that might be what they're hoping.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that with the California cannabis industry, as it can be set up to fail quite successfully. And we saw that as well as in the 90s. There were successful runs with hemp, but in the end, it still ran into its own set of problems from, Ralph Lauren asking for 2 million meters, which killed the fiber industry, and then, overextension of other creditors in the Eastern European bloc caused an outright collapse of what looked like a very bright and growing industry. So even at the precipice, we can see its rug, literally all puns intended, pulled right out from under it. because of lack of infrastructure and support. That's why when you see, hemp products, people buy them, support them, wear them. It's very helpful. Next up will be Council Member Michael Crowitz. Michael.
Yeah, before I dig into this question, I got a little bit of a follow-up, and humor me here for a second. This may be part debrief, and it's certainly maybe crying on your shoulder. But I think if we can strip the politics away from it and just talk about it in the abstract, I think I would really love to hear your take on this. So anyway, the background is sustainability. The point I'm going to talk about is something that just happened in the Commission on Narcotic Drugs that we attended over in Vienna, Austria, just a week or two ago. And the background is that back coming into the year 2000, there's this dynamic in the UN where the UN drug control system is in Vienna, Austria, but the headquarters is in New York. And the headquarters is where all the countries meet to talk about big picture stuff and review, what the drug people have been doing, same countries, but smaller, different teams in Vienna, or the medicine people have been doing, for that matter, or human rights people have been doing in Geneva, for that matter. So, but anyway, in coming into the year 2000, they came up with something they called the Millennium Development Goals. And as I understood it, it was just, the same goals and issues that they had in the various resolutions. They tried to come up with a different way to sort of package it so that they could have a different way of approaching it more systemically and with better metrics of success. That's always been my take on it. And then, of course, they blew that deadline all to hell and they renamed it the Sustainable Development Goals and gave it a 2030 date to really show some progress. And again, from a cannabis perspective, I've always loved the Sustainable Development Goals because it gives real metrics of success. We got these guys that would come to the UN drug meetings and they say, well, we arrested more people than last year. We put more people in jail than last year. We had more successful prosecutions than last year. Those things are all great, but they're not good metrics of success. They're great successes, I guess, in some manner, but they're not good metrics of success. The metrics of success in the Sustainable Development Goals are, did you give people more jobs? Are people hungry? Do they have access to medicine? Do they feel safer? And those are, again, not touchy-feely things. I mean, these are straight up, things that we all need and that have been very highly valued in all the various meetings. They're just giving them a different, way to approach it. That's been my take on it. So anyway, bringing it up to current events, the United States threw a monkey wrench in the process over in Vienna because we refused to allow our signature to go on a resolution that spoke of the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, that somehow the Sustainable Development Goals were, quote, not in line with the priorities and how did they say it? the priorities of this administration, something like that. So anyway, I'd love your thoughts on that. I mean, if I've somehow missed something, but sustainability to me, what does that mean? Like that, the last question, I mean, we're talking about sustainability, what's the benefit of that? What, in one word or in one string, from your perspective, and what do you make of all that shit that I just said?
Yeah, well, elect a felon, expect felonies. It doesn't, he's killing everything that has a an E or an I in it, except Don, Eric, and Ivanka. It should, we buckle up, bro. It's going to be a hell of a 3 3/4 years to go. It's you said to take the politics off of it, but it's 100% political, and they're doing it just because it has the word sustainability in it. They may not know anything more than that, um, but they're going to kill it just because it has sustainability. The fact is, hemp grain meets all but I think two of the goals of the UN SDG, and is well suited for it, especially on the grain side, and because of food security and food sovereignty and like. And it just doesn't really seem to get much support. Sure, Facebook shadow bans us, but and Instagram, but so do our side. The associations don't really do anything other than what's within their narrow vision to do. Um, the media is, just running whatever press releases they get and not really doing in-depth stories anymore. Um, there's been a cabal controlling information in hemp since the 90s. It's no accident that the Straight Trade Association back then had a former CIA director as its lobbyist, illegal lobbyist, because they weren't the right entity for a lobbyist. So, and the people connected with that have been around controlling hemp for a very long time and not doing a very good job of it. And that's why it's been messed up for a couple of decades. Back then, Canadian hemp almost died, as did the grain industry. When people with no burden of compliance sued DEA and killed the market for years, it those that kind of energy of needing to control the information and the development of the commercialization of it has really been an albatross on the neck of the industry. And the sooner it can open up to people with better ideas and bigger vision and more money and more integrity. Warren Buffett, legendary investor Warren Buffett, says integrity is the number one metric for his executives, measuring executives. And by not having integrity since it got legalized in 18, the industry has suffered. And we now honor grifters and people that objectively do harm to the industry. And we isolate those we need to learn from. The only blacklist that HIA, Hemp Industries Association, had was the two people who developed hemp's $2 billion industries: food, grain, me, and Chris Boucher, who developed the CBD side 15 years ago. And because we wouldn't sell a popular lie, we got blacklisted. In Chris's case, it was that they wanted to say the CBD was Schedule 1, and he was saying hemp is legal in all 50 states. And in my case, they were saying DEA bans hemp food, and I'm saying, no, we can comply with this. Let's not dick around. Let's not hurt the market and scare people about talking about THC once we got that issue put to bed. And sure enough, they sued and the market died, and Canadian hemp almost died as well. So there's been an undercurrent of mismanagement and control in this industry by people whose names you know and you hear and you see getting patted on the back all the time. And this is the result. It's, loss of 95% of acres in 5 years. It didn't need to be this way. If you have better alternatives, you should be open to hearing them.
Thank you for that. I really, really appreciate it. So the question is about entrepreneurs, folks entering into the hemp and cannabis markets today. I think you answered this a little bit before. I think if I understood you correctly, you were telling people basically they should steer away from, flashy flowers and buds that might grow and actually grow more for seed. If I understood you correctly, looking for a future market that would be better. But anyway, if that's correct, let me know. And then the rest of the question is, what key lessons from your experience would you share, generally for new folks coming up, to help them succeed?
So the first part was slightly off. What I suggest is to buy shelled seeds, say from Manitoba, and make foods from them, putting a label on it, consumer packaged food that you can then sell into distribution. That doesn't require I mean, we could have been doing that all along for the last 30 years. That's what I did, back in the 90s. So, and in so doing, you build demand that, in theory, should be able to justify production locally, growing the seed locally and shelling it locally to make that food that became really popular that you started by buying, say, Manitoba Harvest seed. So what an entrepreneur can do is basically that kind of idea, is find somebody to make food for them, for their brand, under their brand, their label, and get it into distribution by hook or by crook. There are plenty of guys that just have independent routes that service gas stations and C-stores and markets and the like. That kind of, you start however you can. You don't want to do it yourself. You want somebody who's already in the store, and this is the add-on for them. It's an incremental profit item for them. They'll make a little bit, and they're already delivering hundreds of dollars worth of stuff. You don't want to have to deliver just one product. So you want to find distribution. You want to find ways of getting it into people's hands. It doesn't even have to be through a store. It could be online. And buy seed and get it made, get a food made, a consumer packaged food, a pasta, a chocolate, a piece of chocolate, or a chocolate chip cookie, or a milk or yogurt, cheese. It could be a seasoning. It could be a hamburger helper. It could be something that you add to tofu to make a veggie burger. It could be a tempeh kit that you add a couple ounces of shelled hemp seed to, and sell that online. There's a million ways to leverage your wheelhouse and whatever you're good at in developing a hemp business without growing 1 acre or having a factory or even having much money.
All right, Council Member Michael Davis has follow-up.
Well, I think I had a follow-up, but you said without growing 1 acre, but that was actually going to be my follow-up was if someone did want to grow hemp. I heard you mentioning earlier, and we've had some of these discussions ourselves about growing hemp and maybe best areas and things like that. And I heard you mention, purchasing like a couple thousand acres or 100 acres, I think somewhere in the Midwest. If someone did want to get into, maybe growing hemp, are there certain areas that you would think of that would be best for growing hemp? Is there a bunch of areas? What kind of problems do you think you may encounter? One thing that we had potentially discussed that seemed like that would be beneficial about bringing hemp to market the most efficient way was, I believe it was the old sugar mills and such that are like potentially down in like Mississippi and the South and things of that area where you kind of have everything that's, all right there. But, if maybe you have some insight or, kind of everything that's involved with the whole growing, cultivating hemp. And if you didn't mind going into that, maybe explain some of that for maybe those who would be interested in partaking or going into that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, earlier when Etienne said that he grew up around those sugar mills, that they grew it all within an hour distance of the mill, or nearby the mill. That's not by accident. That's because it just costs you money to drive it. So the best place to grow for grain, assuming you want to build a big a vertically integrated food company based on hemp grain, is located in the north because you get more hours of sunlight, and the grain likes it better up north. And it's going to take finding a lot of acreage and a lot of farmers that are willing to do this and are willing to be cooperative. That's what we did in Tasmania. We had the poppy growers, the opium poppy growers there, and they were looking for a crop to transition to because fent and the synthetics are cutting into the market. So they wanted to, if you're used to growing opium poppies, growing hemp is sort of not as big a stigma as if you're used to growing corn. Growing hemp is a bit of a stigma. So there's that to deal with. You have to deal with very conservative corn growers and soybean growers and others. You got to figure out how to work it into a crop rotation. so that they're not losing money and missing a season. And there's it's a huge project, which is why it hasn't been done. It would be way easier to just grow 3 acres and make CBD oil out of it. So people did that. But it's going to take local, county, state, regional, and federal coordination, along with deep pocket investors, to pull something like this off. Especially if you want to be vertical and you want to, not just contract out for randos to supply you with your material, but you want to control the production and the agronomy and the variety and the soil and everything. It's a big project. It's what they did in Canada. It's what they've done in Europe. It's what they've done in China. And it's the only way it's going to happen here. It's a big ass project, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of planning. It's going to take a couple of years probably before you could even do field trials, because you got to figure out what you want to trial for. It can be done. I just don't see anybody even close to doing it. The fiber guys seem to be well on their way, but on the grain side, we're still waiting for a dedicated shelling and pressing plant in the Midwest somewhere. It's still missing, and once we get that, then we can start figuring out how to drive costs down. Being able to sell the fiber, being able to sell noids, things like that help bring the net cost of the grain down. So when you shell it, you have a price advantage over competitors, because it takes 2.5 pounds of whole seed to get 1 pound of shell. So if you have a lower price on the input whole seed, you'll have a significantly lower price on the shelled seed. Little tricks like that are going to come into play. Can you scrape the resin off the machine so that maybe you can collect some noids from it? And, vertical integration with the stocks. Maybe you do a consumer brand of I don't know, animal bedding or something. Biochar for the roots. The green buffalo approach.
Councilmember Laughter has a follow-up.
Yeah, I'm
Muted yourself, Wade.
I I don't feel real in touch with the nationwide or international hemp market. I know that at one point Colorado seemed to have a thriving hemp industry. And yet I've not heard you mention it as a possible spot for, in my vision, it would be a collective, a group of farmers that recognize the potential, that would put together the financing for the factory, the facility to process the hemp. And ideally, they'd go for long strand fiber and high quality seed. And meantime, Colorado's got great growing conditions. And I know at least 15 years ago had a pretty thriving hemp industry. So I'd love to hear your impression of Colorado today, if you're up to speed on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I am. So originally, Colorado grew marijuana that had an upside down cannabinoid ratio. It was high in CBD and low in THC. That's how Colorado became a hemp state. Was with that, they grew some fiber, a little bit of grain, but it really was all about CBD and floral hemp for smoking and the like. Colorado has the reason you wouldn't want to do it in Colorado is the same as you wouldn't want to do it in California, and that's growers of type 1 downwind. And that's been the problem in Humboldt in the 90s. John Stahl built a 3-acre DEA Schedule 1 approved, with fencing, 12-foot fence and barbed wire and lights and all that, to grow fiber hemp to make paper. and he was on K-Mud Radio, and the growers made it really clear to him he wasn't gonna, they weren't gonna let it go to pollen. They weren't gonna let the males pollinate because of that. So that's a problem same with California, is the same problem with Colorado. And if I were to do it, I would look to someplace like South Dakota or North Dakota, Montana, Minnesota, those states that have less type ones downwind, and are more conservative and further north, and so for more sunlight hours and the like. But Colorado's not a good place for it. In those early years, there was a lot of upset about seeded floral hemp that they had to de-seed to make the oil out of, and the like. So, and it's the same problem in California. They've hated on hemp for decades because of medical grows downwind.
Just the facts. Thank you very much, Council Member Mary Lynn Mathery.
Unmute. Yeah, you're just talking about my hometown area. We've unfortunately just gave up a family, lost, I should say, but a family farm up in North Dakota, Red River Valley area. And you're right, when they first passed the hemp bill, or to allow farmers to grow it, back in the day when we were going to grow it for hemp, not for CBD products, but convinced at this time, my grandfather, the farm was taken over by some neighbors. I shouldn't say taken over. They were doing the farming. My grandfather was nearing 100 years old. And so we were trying to convince them, to grow it. My mother was all scared. Oh, marijuana. I go, nobody's going to grow any marijuana in the middle of a hemp field. But just the idea that it didn't come through. And I just sitting here now, it's like, oh, what a perfect place. And it was back in the day when my grandfather was more active, that those farmers did work so well together as co-ops. He was a state legislator, and he talked about going to, when he'd go, the rest of the farmers would cover him while when he'd have to be gone, and only did a term because that was my turn. Somebody else will represent us later. Right. In the days, the way it should be. Yeah, because right now, you're right. Anything with sustainability, and it just is getting crushed in our current administration. But I guess what just talking to you today just gave me more insight, not insight, but I guess a better look at what I want to do with my property in Virginia. But anyway, as a nurse in starting Patients Out of Time, our goal was to educate people about medical cannabis. But the whole time it was always including hemp because we look at the health of the planet as well as health of communities, as well as health individuals. And it just fits in so well. And my goal here is I've got not that much, but 53 acres on the James River in Virginia. And my long-term goal, working on it, not getting very far, but is to have this be a veteran retreat, literally to use cannabis for healing, but to teach them how to grow the plant, and thinking of just growing hemp for a lot of the products, teaching. So it more or less have this place as a teaching spot. They go on and go wherever they can in the industry. And as you're talking about, I'm thinking, yeah, we'll be small scale, but the idea of having some 4 seeds and to be able to just have that, continue the education, just make it into kind of a show place too, where people come and learn all the things you can do with this plant. Because it's such a giving plant. We use everything. So actually, this is a plug. I need to consult with you later.
Anytime. That sounds good. Yeah. What we learned from the Canadian experience the last 25 years is co-ops are critical. Otherwise, the processors have way more power over the farmers, and they can dictate. They promise 70 cents and 2 years later pay 20 cents, things like that, and to the farmer per pound for whole grain. So that's really critical to have a more cohesive network to pursue this, like a co-op, and not have it be processors using their power over the farmers, and get everybody on the same page that way. That was really a big experience to learn from Canada and how they went about it.
Lessons learned.
Yeah, it's these are things we learned early on, and especially when we were looking specifically at, importation of hemp, we didn't have that luxury. Whereas where I grew up in Louisiana, all of the sugarcane farmers that I grew up on were cooperatives together so that they could actually come together and command a higher price. Otherwise, it's like any other agricultural crop, right? It's a race to the bottom. So, it's which we've seen with cannabis, right? It started off very strong, and high number wise, but even the CBD people saw, the collapse of, the realities that they had thought was going to be a sustained reality. But, without, again, infrastructure and seeing plants grown at spaces of 6 foot as opposed to, how I was we were industrially growing in, Hungary and Romania, for what we were producing. It's just, it's a night and a day and a frustration. So as you've watched this growth from, I watched you get in your fight with the Hemp Industries Association, which was, I thought was absolutely terrible and detrimental to the Hemp Industries Association, right? Because as you stated, they're a multi-billion dollar crop. And what you were doing and producing, you were on television shows promoting your product, crossing over. And you saw then the collapse of the market. Of course, you stepped out of hemp foods, etc. So, how do you now navigate these waters? Are you a consultant? What do you do nowadays, etc., to get by? Because you have such a wisdom about cannabis. Do you have anything to promote as well?
um, I I've been teaching on well, in general a long time, but on hemp 30 something years, and I haven't charged yet to do it. And started the Hemp Food Association. We had 49 members in 1998, and we're the only hemp association to not charge dues, just providing technical assistance, and had a stellar board of advisors: Jace Calloway, Dave West, John McPartland, folks like that. Rob Clark was on the board as well. And so I've never charged. So this isn't about me promoting stuff to sell. But I do the Richard Rose report. There's hundreds of original articles and thousands of posts on hemp and CBD, dozens of downloads of exclusive stuff that you can't get elsewhere, tools I use to manage that Inc. 500 business, things like that. Um, if you want to learn how to shell hemp seed, I have a huge file in there with a ton of information and quotes for machines and diagrams and a few Easter eggs and things like that in there. So there's a lot of tools there for burgeoning entrepreneurs, hempreneurs who want to do this kind of business or want to do this business in a better way. The other thing I do for free is the Hemp Food Association, the hfa.org. And again, many exclusive downloads and original articles, but it's all on grain and food side of things. But that, I don't really sell anything. Consulting, the only people that have hired me for consulting are people who have known me for decades. I don't promote. I don't try to get people to hire me. I don't go to the expos. I don't have exhibits. I don't advertise. If you try to get me to consult for you, I'll probably talk you out of it. And so I don't really do that even anymore. And mostly I'm just gonna, you can't really see it here, but I have my boogie there, my high-speed computer here, my monitors here, my keyboard here, my audio interface here, my Spark amp here, and my bong here, two monitors, and my guitar there, my bass there, and another guitar. So I'm mostly recording and doing stuff like that these days because I don't make money. I don't do it for a living, and it costs money, and it's just 95% loss of acres in 5 years, and hemp THC in vape pens and gas stations sold to teens in the South is a crazy way to do the hemp industry. So I'm just going to step away and do things that make me happy instead. Music.
Music's kept me sane. I mean, I wouldn't be able to, have navigated many of my trials and tribulations without having music to escape and connect my soul and disconnect my soul at times, right? It's
Sometimes at the
grounding.
same time.
Yeah.
It's grounding, and it's also it's like a language. It's like a side of our life, our brain, our personalities that you take that away, and it's difficult, and so it gives us a way to express things. I write. I'm getting back into writing songs, and I can only write songs if I'm pissed off. So I'm doing that now again, and producing some songs. You'll see them in the next few months. You'll start seeing them roll out.
All right. Besides, your music, do you have anything to promote? Any thing that you're working on that's coming out?
Well, no, I did. I in August I released CD. I guess we should talk about that. CD is a 177 pages, like 45,000 words or something, and it tells you how to start a hemp food company, and all the things I talked about. It'll cover in there much more detail. It talks about marketing and compliance and how to find a co-packer and how to do it.
And
How I did it on the cheap with no loans and investors and the like.
where does one find CD? It's your
Well,
time to
both,
promote.
yeah, both those websites, the richardrosereport.com and the Hemp Food Association site, which is the-hfa.org, have them for free download. Again, it's free. I don't charge for stuff. And yeah, just get it there. I think it's probably on a few places on Facebook, but those websites definitely get it. Look around there. There's some other interesting downloads if you're trying to start businesses. A CBD business. There's financial forecasts and the like there for budding entrepreneurs.
All puns intended, right?
Indeed.
All righty. Well, I cannot thank you enough for a fascinating talk and discussion. I would like to thank our council members, Michael Crowitz, Marilyn Mathry, Michael Davis, Wade Laughter, and hello, Asaya Gonzalez. And Richard Rose, thank you very much for this absolutely fascinating discussion. And thank you for your leadership for many years in, taking the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and turning them into something tasty and educational all along the way. And forever have my respect. So thank you very much for your diligence and your continued service in this drug war.
Thank you, gentlemen and lady. It's an honor to be here with you guys. Tons of respect to you guys and the work you're doing, and appreciate you. And anytime you want to talk, just let me know.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm your host, Etienne Fontan, and this has been our VAC Roundtable number 88 with Richard Rose. Thank you very much, everybody.